Hey everybody, so I'm Ellie Powers from the Google Play team, and thanks so much for cutting your lunch a little bit short to make it back here. So, when I was 13 years old, and I was in middle school, we read this book. It was called Lakota Woman, and it was this really powerful story of a woman who grew up in a Native American reservation in South Dakota. The place looked like this, really beautiful place. But her story was completely different from mine. She went through all sorts of struggles that I'd never heard about. And we read this book as part of our larger unit that we were doing on Native American history. And, you know, in order to graduate 7th grade, we had to complete a massive independent research project. I'd never done anything like it before. And after reading her story, I said, I have to do my presentation on Native American religious freedom and oppression in the United States in the second half of the 1900s, because I was a 13-year-old, and I guess that's just what made sense to me at the time. So I went into the library. I had procrastinated a bit, I do admit. So I tried to find books that talked about the topic that I wanted to write about. And I really wanted to write about individual stories of people who had experienced oppression and had had struggles in terms of being able to express their religious beliefs. And, you know, it wasn't so surprising looking back on it that I couldn't find these books because the information was either too new or it was too controversial to be published. But luckily, I grew up in Silicon Valley, so even though my life was a little bit weird, it meant that I had some tools that I could access that helped me do a little bit more than I could have done with my local library. I want to introduce you to my Spark Station. Anyone remember this computer? This was the first computer that I had that could access the internet, and it was back in the early 90s. And my family had a Sun Spark Station that looked almost exactly like this. And this computer was so awesome. Not only did it have a CD-ROM drive, it also had a color screen. It didn't have Firefox, because that didn't exist. But it had a 3-button mouse. You can't even buy those anymore. I mean, 3 buttons. That's 50% more efficient than most mice on the market today. And best of all, my Spark Station had a modem. And I was one of the first people I knew who could connect to the internet. The internet wasn't amazing back then like it is today, and you couldn't do a lot. But this was my first chance to find information that wasn't available in my local library and to reach out to people who I would have never met otherwise. So when I was trying to write my report and I couldn't find any books, at first I thought I was completely out of luck. But then I realized that my Spark Station had Mosaic. Do you remember Mosaic? Do you remember these dark gray backgrounds? You remember them, I can see that. Do you remember the blue links and when you clicked on them, they turned purple? I mean, that was awesome, right? And I found Mosaic. I could cruise around a little bit. And then if you didn't have Mosaic, maybe you had Gopher. Do you remember Gopher? It was like a lot of folders, and you could just go from one folder to the next folder, another folder. And sometimes you could find images and text in those folders and send your folders to your friends and like tell them which folders were the best. This was really cool. And it was through these tools that I stumbled onto something amazing that solved all of my problems. It was called Nat Chat, Native American Chat. And basically, this is where historians and other people interested in Native American issues would go to talk about anything related to Native American culture. So I started hanging out in Nat Chat. I got completely immersed in a whole new world that I had never even heard of before. I got all the information that I needed for my project. I interacted with new people who had nothing to do with my regular everyday life, and I wrote my report. Not only did I write my report, but I included all this information I'd learned from people that no one in my school had learned about, and I felt that I was able to educate not only myself, but also my teachers and other students. I felt so powerful, and I said, this is great. I've accomplished something important, and I want everyone else to have this same experience. So, of course, remember I was 13, I taught my little siblings how to use the computer. I wanted them to have that feeling too. And that was cool, but that wasn't enough either. I wanted everyone to have, you know, this great experience, this feeling of connectedness. And I thought, yep, sooner or later, everyone's going to have their own Spark Station just like me, and this is going to be awesome. But looking back, this was never going to happen. It wasn't going to be possible that everyone could have a Spark Station. If you look at the technology that we have today, it's so different from that Spark Station. Let's do a couple comparisons. So this Spark Station, with its awesome 3-button mouse, thousands of dollars. An Android One phone, which is basically a supercomputer in comparison, less than $100 bucks. Obviously a huge benefit. Before Do you remember learning touch typing? Mavis Beacon, and you had to learn how to, press all those little buttons in the right order? That was actually hard looking back on it. And today we have touch screens and sensors. They're so simple that you don't even have to teach young kids how to start using a phone or a tablet. They just figure it out. Back then, you had your big Spark station stuck on your desk. There were tons of wires coming out of it. If the power ever went out, you lost all your work. But today, you can connect anywhere in the world. You can charge your phone wherever you can. It's so much better. And this is great, because back in the day, only a couple of super nerds could connect to the internet, and I didn't think that was fair. I wanted all super nerds to connect to the internet. In fact, I wanted everybody to connect to the internet. And so this ability to give people the same powerful feeling of connectedness and access to information is actually why I'm at Google. I'm really excited to be here because Google's mission to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible is so deeply tied to what's important to me and what has made a difference in my own life. And so what Google Play is it's what happens when we've connected now literally 1 billion people, and we've given them access to a connected catalog of experiences. And that catalog and those connected experiences are made possible by developers like all of you. And so now here we are at this special moment in history. Developers can have a huge impact on both local and global problems because everyone's connected now, and a lot of that is through Android. So I want to tell you a story of some of these developers. Our first story takes us to Sao Paulo, Brazil. And emprego legado means jobs online in Portuguese. We actually have a couple people here from the emprego legado team today, which is pretty awesome. And they're proud to say that they have made the #1 blue-collar job service in all of Brazil. So let's learn a little bit more about why this is important. So Sao Paulo is home to 11.8 million people and the worst traffic jams in the world, according to Time magazine. So emprego legado saw this common pain point. This commute time in Sao Paulo, it's just painful. I mean, 3 hours. That is a long time to spend commuting every single day. And the most common way to get around there is actually on a public bus. There's about 16,000 buses in Sao Paulo. These buses are often overcrowded, it can be hard to get a seat, and 3 hours a day is a long time to spend your life sitting on a bus or standing on a bus. And so this is some of the traffic that you'll be spending your time sitting through. Luckily, it's a beautiful city and it even has some cool murals to look at, but I mean, that's just a lot of your life. And so emprego legado had a key insight. Let's say we compare 2 people. One person has this crazy 3-hour daily commute. Another person has a more reasonable commute of around 1 hour per day. So if you do the math, that basically means that the person with a long commute is wasting 20 business days of their life commuting. That's time when they're not economically productive, they can't earn money, they can't spend time with their family, and it's creating a huge financial and psychological impact on them. So emprego legado was founded back in 2012 by 3 college friends who were incredibly passionate about Latin America and went to live and work there. Not only did they see this problem, that people were spending a lot of time commuting, and that wasn't very fun. And actually that was leading to the traffic problems in the big cities of Brazil getting worse and worse. But also, employees had an extremely inefficient recruiting process, and it was hard for them to find the right employees for their companies. So the job market was really broken, actually. Job seekers had no way to find out about new jobs that were available. So if you had a job, you would just stick it out until maybe you happened to hear about something, maybe your friend tells you. But until then, you were stuck. And employers were really struggling too. They needed to find people with the right experience. And the commute time was the top reason that a lot of people left jobs. There was a survey, actually, that 37% of people who were earning a kind of low to middle wage in the region said that they had actually left a job due just to traffic, no other reason, just their commute. And so imagine if you had 37% of your workforce potentially leaving their job at your company and you'd have to replace them just because of the commuting situation. I mean, that's tough. And so they calculated that, let's say we have a company with about 100,000 employees. So you could be losing up to $80 million a year due to employee turnover because of these retention and recruitment difficulties. But not only did they see this problem, they also saw an opportunity to increase transparency in the job market. So they looked at the job market, and these are the most common jobs in Brazil. So you have, you could be a waiter in a restaurant, maybe you drive a truck, maybe, you're a contractor, maybe you work as an assistant in a shop. And in fact, these types of jobs represent 85% of the entire Brazilian workforce. And so they decided to focus on these types of jobs. And these not only were the most popular jobs, but also here the information transparency was the poorest. So this was really an opportunity to have a hugely broad impact. Often, you'd find out a worker could have had a similar job in their local neighborhood, but they just had no way to find it. Imagine how frustrating that would be. So let's talk about the type of person who Emprego Legado is able to help. So Fernanda, if we drew her as an Androidify cartoon, would look like this. And so, you know, she's got a cool pink suit. And so she had been unemployed for about 3.5 weeks when she signed up for Emprego Legado. And this time had been really stressful for her. She had a family who depended on her, and they needed her support. And she also used to have a long commute. And with a city full of supermarkets, you'd think it should be easy for her to find a new job. But unfortunately, she hadn't had any luck. So when Emprego Legado got started in 2012, they built a full-featured job search system using just text messaging. So think about the last text message that you sent. You know, maybe it was like LOL, OMG, or a couple of emoji. Now imagine that you were using the same system to find qualified workers meaningful jobs in their local area. So this is a big usability challenge that they managed to overcome. So I want to walk you through what Fernanda did with this system. So first, she enters her location. Then she says that she wants to work in a supermarket. She specifies her desired salary. And then she starts getting a list of jobs matching her criteria. On average, these jobs are about 4 kilometers away from her home, so it's a big improvement. Then she can schedule an interview or share each different job with a friend. She confirms her interview. She's good to go. And Emprego Legado had started getting some great results from their SMS-only service. But you can see that this process isn't quite as interactive or as easy to use as you might want it to be. So they saw another trend. Android was starting to take off in Brazil, big time. And so they saw that this was an opportunity for them to build a much more engaging experience. So the app launched in September 2014 with all the same goals as the SMS service, but it's a lot more fun to use. And they saw that Android users were actually a lot more engaged with the service too. They were, in fact, applying to about 8 times more jobs than the average person on the SMS service. And the jobs they applied for tended to require more technical skills too. They also saw that the people using the Android app were actually much younger, on average, than the people using the SMS-only service. And that's pretty exciting, because in Brazil, there's actually a very popular national apprenticeship program. That's a real big on-ramp for a lot of young Brazilians to find a meaningful career that will take them far in their lives. And now they're doing this with Emprego Legado to help them. So far, they've had a significant impact. They've had over 1 million users through both their SMS and their Android app services, and they've been able to match about 8 million jobs to their users' search criteria. And think about what that would do if that was you. If your commute time got reduced by that much, not only would you feel more relaxed, you'd have time with your family, but maybe you could even walk or bike to work, and that would have a big impact on your health too. And then it also had a big impact on employers. You know, we talked earlier about the struggles that employers would have with recruitment. And now it's really helped them reduce their training costs because they're able to find employees who have more relevant experience. And because the commute times are better, they're no longer losing so many employees due to the traffic problems and the transit time. And so this is how Emprego Legado is using their disruptive job matching algorithms to save millions of dollars for Brazilian companies every year on retention and employee recruitment. And Emprego Legado actually makes money providing this service. That's pretty awesome. And this has allowed them to expand their own team. They've now grown to a team of 40, and 36 of them are Brazilians. They get interviewed on the TV news regularly about how they're helping the traffic problem. They're actually taking crowded buses off the roads. So let's go back to Fernanda. So with Emprego Legado, she was able to find a new job really quickly. And it was a job that she was really well qualified for, and it was much closer to her home. So with this extra time she was able to save, she could spend more time with her family and really had an improved quality of life. So here we have how Emprego Legado is making the Brazilian job market work better for everybody. They're increasing access to information for both employees and employers. Now we're going to move to a totally different part of the world, and we're going to talk about Flipkart in Bangalore, India. So has anyone here used the Flipkart app? Yeah? Fantastic. Well, if you haven't tried it before, I'll tell you a little bit more about what you can buy. You could get basically any type of product. You could get a lamp for your living room. You could get a refrigerator, you could get some new clothes, and actually when I was cruising around the Flipkart app, I learned about a new type of product I'd never even heard of before. Bike sleeves. Does anyone know these? Yeah? These are awesome. So if you've never heard of them, they're something that you wear on your arms. They're kind of like leg warmers, but you wear them when you're riding your motorcycle. And if you want to, you're a more minimalist person, you can choose a basic color like black or white. And then if you want to go a little bit wild, you can choose these tattoo printed bike sleeves over here on the right. And the reason that Flipkart sells bike sleeves is that in India, motorcycles are an extremely popular way to get around. Today, we're seeing that in India, about 2 million cars every month are sold, but about 12 million motorcycles. So having the right set of products that meets the market's needs is really key to Flipkart's growth. And their growth has been enormous. As of March this year, they're moving about $4 billion of merchandise annually, and they're expecting it to double by the end of the year. So where's this growth coming from? It's coming from mobile. And the online shopping market in India is growing huge. In 2016, there's going to be about 100 million online shoppers, and the market's going to grow by about 50% for the next 4 years. It's going to get up to about $16 billion in 2018. And this is all made possible because of the massive growth of smartphones. So next year, in India, the number of smartphone users is actually going to be bigger than the entire population of the United States. This is huge. And in India, mobile has gotten so popular that Flipkart's focusing more and more on apps. They're making so much more money. In fact, their Android app has about 1.5x higher order frequency compared to the desktop web. 90% of their mobile traffic's on Android. And so they've taken the next logical step. They shut down their mobile website. And they said, hey, just go get our app. And their sister site, Myntra, which is actually owned by Flipkart, took it one step further. And on May 1st this year, they actually shut down their desktop website too. You just go there and it says, get our app. And we're seeing a lot of similar announcements across all sorts of online retailers in India because of this massive growth in mobile. So one of the reasons that Flipkart has been so successful is they know how to market to people there. They know how to make the right things, but they also know how to make sense of logistical problems and how to solve them in a local way that makes sense. So I found about this group of people recently. It's a whole community of people, and here's what they do. If you're an office worker, they go to your house in the morning. They pick up a hot cooked lunch that someone in your house has made for you. They deliver it to your desk hot just in time for lunch. You eat your lunch, and then they take your lunchbox back home for you. And they're called the dabwalas, and they've been doing this for about 120 years. In Mumbai, there's about 5,000 dabwalas, and they deliver about 200,000 lunches per day. It's amazing. And Flipkart recently announced that they're going to be working with the dabwalas to do last-mile delivery in some of India's biggest cities. And the reason they wanted to do this is that the dabwalas are basically awesome. They deliver tons of packages with nearly zero errors. In fact, Harvard Business School did a 2010 case study, and they compared the accuracy of the dabwalas to the Six Sigma process, and they said, yep, it's basically meeting that same level of reliability and service. And so we're seeing here how Flipkart is combining new technologies with local market insights to create a new market, a new e-commerce market in one of the world's biggest economies. So next, we're going to go to Europe. We're going to go to BlaBlaCar. And if you haven't tried them yet, you should the next time you're in Europe or one of the many other places that we're going to talk about soon. They're the most successful long-distance ride-sharing service. So when you sign up for BlaBlaCar, you have to describe yourself. OK, anyone else in the audience a blah? If you don't know what that means, it means you don't like to talk in the car. Just don't talk to me. Maybe you're like me, and you like to talk a little bit, but not the whole time. And then we probably all know someone in our life who we'd call a blah, 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 and that's someone who just talks non-stop. So why is this important? Well, if you are running a hugely successful long-distance ride-sharing service, where the average trip is about 200 miles, you're going to quickly learn that if you stick a blah and a blah, blah, blah together in a car for 200 miles, you are going to have two very unhappy customers. But if you have this algorithm and you know what questions to ask, you'll know that you can just stick two blah, blah, blahs together, and maybe you've built a lifelong friendship. So let's talk about how BlaBlaCar works with one of its most popular routes. Let's say that I'm a driver. I have my Renault. I live in Paris, and I'm going to go back to my hometown of Rennes, where I grew up. Maybe it's for the holidays, maybe I'm just making an impromptu visit to a friend, and I'm actually gonna have to spend a lot of money on gas and tolls to get there. It's gonna be a long drive. And in fact, the trip may be so expensive that I can't even go as often as I'd like to. So I can just launch the BlaBlaCar app, and it'll match me with other people going the same way. I don't actually make money doing this, but I can offset all of my costs of gas and tolls. And I can sell the other 3 seats in my Renault to 3 other people who are going on the same trip. So this is a much cheaper alternative. So a train ticket would cost about 3 times as much. A plane ticket would cost about 6 times as much. And if you've ever had that experience of buying a train or plane ticket at absolutely that last minute when it's so critical, you know that those costs could be way more. So it's a good option to have. And this is the BlaBlaCar team. They're headquartered in Paris, and it sounds like a really fun place to work. One of my favorite programs I heard about is called the BlaBla Swap. So they have offices all over the globe because they reach so many users. And if you do a BlaBla Swap, what you can do is go work in another company's office for a week. And this helps not only you to have fun, but also to exchange ideas and best practices between offices. So BlaBlaCar has made massive expansions recently. They're now reaching about 2 million people every single month. They have about 20 million members, and they're reaching 19 different countries. So they're all over Europe, but also in Turkey, Russia, and most recently, Mexico and India as well. And here are the benefits that BlaBlaCar can bring. So we talked about the money savings before, and that's great. But it also helps with the environment, and it helps with traffic problems as well. The average BlaBlaCar actually has 2.8 people, up from a typical average in Europe of about 1.7 people per car. And BlaBlaCar has had Android apps for a long time, since back in 2010. And they found that their mobile experience means people can book rides easily at the very last minute. And because more than half of their users are actually on Android, they've invested a lot in making some great Android experiences. So they made an Android Wear app here. It allows you to see when someone is trying to link up with you to arrange a ride. And they did a material design refresh of their app recently as well. It's gotten some great user feedback. They're also going to add a new feature soon called Meet My Co-Rider. So this is a neat feature where it'll allow co-riders to temporarily share their locations. So this way, they can see each other as dots on the map, and it makes it a lot easier to try to meet up with somebody. So the CEO of BlaBlaCar says that people join because they want to save money. That makes sense. That's a logical reason. They want to travel more often, and they don't want to spend too much. But they keep using it, not because of the money, but because it allows them to make social connections that they never would have had before. I thought the BlaBlaCar was going to be basically just college students, right? That's kind of who you'd expect to take it. And there are some college students, but if you look at their demographics, they're actually reaching all sorts of different age brackets. Typically, actually, it's the older drivers who have the cars and the younger riders who pay to ride. And so it's an interesting way to create these different intergenerational connections that never would have actually happened before. So when you use BlaBlaCar, you save money, and you usually get to know somebody, and you get a good story. So I want to tell you one of these. So there was a guy who had just retired. He had used to have a big car to drive around his son, who did a lot of sports and had a lot of sports gear that he needed to carry around. When his son went off to school, he retired and said, I want to spend more time in St. Malo sailing my boat. Sounds great. But unfortunately, he realized that that was going to be really expensive and difficult for him to afford. So he discovered that BlaBlaCar would allow him to share rides with different people. And that was great. He got to do a lot more sailing. But over time, he realized the thing that contributed most to having an enjoyable retirement was not more time on his boat, but he created 2 new social networks, one in Paris and one in St. Malo, with all the people that he'd met using BlaBlaCar. So this is how BlaBlaCar is connecting the world. They're making travel more affordable and creating new social connections because of information being able to share easily between people. So next up, we have Dexcom. They're here too today, which is great. And they're making some of the world's most advanced blood glucose monitoring technology. And they're focused on improving human health through innovation. So every time I look at these stats on the screen, I get a little bit depressed. I've looked at them a few times. 29 million Americans have been diagnosed with diabetes. And when we say diagnosed, that means that there's a lot more people who have diabetes but are not diagnosed, or people who are pre-diabetic and will become diagnosed soon. But even still, that 29 million is 9.3% of the population. And worse, 200,000 of those people are under age 20. It's also led to a ridiculous amount of cost in terms of lost wages and medical expenses in the US. So if you don't have diabetes yet, you should be happy because it's a lot of work. I have a few friends who have diabetes, and when they're going through a period where their diabetes is getting difficult to control, they have to test their blood sugar all the time. And that can mean before meals, a few times after a meal, before and after exercise, in the middle of the night, anytime they don't feel well. And they have to make sure that their blood sugar doesn't get too high and it doesn't get too low either. And then the information that you get back from a typical blood glucose test is not very useful. What does 95 mean? What's going to happen a half hour from now? How do I know if 95 means that I should eat some candy now because my blood sugar is about to go too low, or I should take some insulin because it's about to go too high? And one patient described this to Dexcom as basically this. It's like I'm driving down a windy road at night, and I only turn on the headlights occasionally. That is scary when your life could depend on this. So the Dexcom team thought that there must be a better way to be able to deal with this. So they've created this continuous glucose monitor, and you wear it on your body, as you can see here. So instead of pricking your finger a few times every day, you just get this continuous graph. Basically, it does the equivalent of checking your blood sugar every 5 minutes, and it gives you the full picture of how your blood sugar is reacting in terms of, you eat something, does it go up and down? You go do some exercise, how does it react? And this makes it easier to monitor your diabetes and keep it under control. So, does anyone here have anyone in their family with diabetes? Maybe a friend? Yeah, a few people? I do. And so this can be a scary experience that you have to manage, especially if that person who has diabetes is a child. So Dexcom, next week, we're very excited about this, they're going to be launching their companion app on Google Play. So the whole idea here is that a parent can use this app on their Android phone to check on their child's blood sugar, and they can even get alerts if that blood sugar goes out of the safe range. And this is great because parents don't have to buy a separate device or carry it around with them. They can just use their existing Android phone to stay on top of their kid's health. And finally, we're incredibly excited about a special integration that Dexcom is doing with Android Wear's latest technology. So we now have something on Android Wear called Direct Connect. And the whole idea here is that you can connect your Dexcom monitor to your Android Wear device without your phone. So why is this really cool? So imagine that you're a kid in school and that you have diabetes, and you need to be checking your blood sugar all the time to make sure that you stay safe. And before, you'd have to look at your monitor all the time. Imagine being a kid and you're kind of pulling something out of your pocket that looks like this all the time. Other kids are probably going to be looking at you, and you may or may not want that. Or you could have it, connect to your phone, and that's definitely better, and you're pulling your phone out of your pocket, and that's a bit better, but it's kind of a hassle. Maybe the teacher's wondering if you're texting people, right? So you want to have something that's more subtle. And the best option here is to just have it go directly to your watch. So you can just glance at your watch as though you were checking the time, and you can see if your blood sugar is staying within range. That's really awesome. And it can allow kids to do things that they might have felt a little scared doing before. Like if you have a waterproof Android Wear watch, you can now use that to check your blood sugar in the pool without even getting out, right? Wouldn't that be great? You can just go swimming, and this can be really critical because exercise can be actually one of the things that can very quickly push your blood sugar out of the safe range. Or imagine that you're playing soccer and you can just check your watch again without having to, try to take some big phone or monitor and try to clip it into your clothes somewhere. It really gives a lot of freedom. Or let's say that you have a really young child. Maybe that child might misplace things, right? We all lost things as a kid. And so if you just give them a watch and you can clip it onto their wrist, then they don't have to worry about misplacing something expensive. So this is a glimpse of what's being possible. And Dexcom is creating all these great new accessible and flexible experiences that make it a lot more convenient and a lot more discreet to keep an eye on your blood sugar and be able to monitor diabetes and manage it well using your smartphone or your watch, whatever works well for you. And they've actually been able to expand now to 39 countries globally, including the US, India, Europe, and also South America. And this is saving families a good bit of money because if you already have an Android or Android Wear device, you don't need to buy something else in order to do this monitoring. And Dexcom has made a huge amount of innovation here to be able to use new technologies to make critical health data available and accessible and shareable as you want at any time. So before we talk about our next app, we're going to have a little quiz. So Does anyone know which film industry makes the most movies every year? Bollywood. I heard someone say Bollywood. Okay, yep. You get an A, it's Bollywood. Okay, so where is Hollywood in this list? Any guesses? 3. Okay, another A. So who is in number 2? Hollywood, Bollywood, and who's in the middle? Okay. It's actually Nollywood. That's the Nigerian film industry. And they're not only are they number 2 in terms of the number of films made, they're also number 3 globally in terms of the revenue in their film industry. And so we're going to talk about an app called Afrinolly based in Lagos, Nigeria, which is a mobile entertainment app. So Nollywood makes about 1,000 movies per year, yeah? And they have a pretty low average production cost. And they've grown so popular that they've actually become the 2nd largest employer in all of Nigeria. And so directors recently have been focused on making even higher quality production value films using new technology to have very high resolution video and audio and producing great experiences. So what doesn't make sense here? We have 173 million people in Nigeria and we have 50 movie theaters. So how does that even work, right? What's going on? And what we learn is that the Nigeria movie culture is based around DVDs. And this can work really well. You go to a city or a town in Nigeria, there's often stores and even people in the streets selling DVDs, and it's basically great. Until DVD making technology got way cheap, maybe even too cheap. And the problem now is that there's a serious problem with piracy of Nollywood DVDs. So if you're a filmmaker in Nigeria, you can actually have a serious problem in terms of making money to be able to create more great films. So the makers of Nollywood saw this problem. But again, they also saw an opportunity because there was a new trend also happening in Nigeria. And yep, it's the mobile phones again. Almost every adult in Nigeria has a mobile phone, and smartphones are growing really quickly too. They're also seeing a lot higher rates of mobile data access, and a lot of adults in Nigeria also get great Wi-Fi service when they're at work too. So this meant a new way for Nollywood directors to distribute their films to all of their fans. And so it's also easier for Nollywood films to reach the global fan base more quickly. So, you know, people in Nigeria are obviously fans, but also people all over Africa, and Brazil is also a huge market for Nollywood films too. So Afrinolly won the Android Developer Challenge 4 years ago in 2011. And the founders got the idea for their app because they saw some data on the top Google searches all over Africa. And a lot of them were searches about Nollywood movies. But at the time, there was no IMDb for African cinema. There really wasn't anywhere to send people. So they decided to create something, and they built Afrinolly to make this information broadly available. So they won the big prize here, $25,000, and they decided to invest that money in marketing the new Afrinolly app. And today, Afrinolly is basically your typical startup. They started with a handful of people. Now they have a team of 12. They're all based in Lagos, Nigeria. And their technical team, 5 people there on the right, are responsible for building the Afrinolly app as well as all of the technical services that Afrinolly works with. So we said that Afrinolly started out as a place to read about the latest Nollywood news and gossip. But now their app has over 4 million downloads, and Android is their fastest growing platform. And this has been building on the massive growth of Android in Nigeria and the rest of Africa. So of course, the set of features that they offered have grown too. In addition to news, you can also watch the latest Nollywood trailers and other video content. And now they're about to take the next step. We mentioned before the piracy problem and how they want to help people make money so that they can make more films. So they're going to be able to let people buy full-length movies within the Afrinolly app. This is going to create a new revenue stream for filmmakers, and people can either stream these movies or download them at work, maybe on the Wi-Fi, and then watch them at home offline. So they had this app, and they wondered, well, let's say that, what if we imagine a world where most of the movie viewing happened on mobile phones? What would be the best sort of content format for that? And they thought about short films. And that was cool, because a lot of young directors make short films as well. It's a great way for people to get started. But the problem is there wasn't a well-established sort of framework in the customer's mind to actually be able to make money on short films. So they started a short film competition, and they now give away $100,000 worth of prizes every year. In the first year, they got 500 submissions from African filmmakers in 14 different countries. And then, the Ford Foundation actually gave them a grant to train and mentor young filmmakers who had been part of the short film competition. And they ended up making a series of films designed to drive social change in West Africa. And these films are now distributed through the Afrinolly app. So, maybe we can try to load this. We have no slide. Hey! All right. All right, I'm going to describe what's on this slide. So, what we're seeing in our mind's eye is something called the Afrinolly Space. So it's really cool. You get to see video studios. Whoa, we're going to go back. All right, we're going to go back. So you get to see video studios. You get to see lots of places to work. You get a high-tech editing space where you can use a high bandwidth connection and a lot of advanced video equipment. And you know, they're able to basically give filmmakers a place to be creative. And so they're going to start doing something new in the Afrinolly Space this year. They're actually going to start teaching coding. They're going to give a coding class to a bunch of high school students, and they're actually going to teach more than coding to them too. They're going to be able to learn how to do filmmaking, how to do cinematography, screenwriting, and more. And so they're hoping that a lot of these young people will be able to create high-quality films not only when they're teenagers, but may actually go on to pursue careers in the film industry in Nigeria. So that's how Afrinolly is using mobile technology to be able to connect film fans with filmmakers in a new way that would never have been possible before a few years ago. So now we're going to talk about Aviro Health. I'm happy that their slide got to be on the screen for a little bit longer because they're pretty awesome. So, whoa. All right. So they built an app. And the whole idea is that it's able to give nurses up-to-date decision support to prescribe the right antiviral drugs for HIV patients. And they've been working with a developer called Mobile Kinetics based in Romania. And they're also working on a new app to be able to connect nurses with experts to consult on the most complex HIV cases that they have. All right. Everyone cross your fingers. Think good thoughts. Hey, fantastic. Has anyone here tried Duolingo to learn a new language? I've tried it, try to brush up on my rusty French. Fantastic. So it is now used by 95 million people to learn a language completely for free. And learning a language can be really fun, but it can do so much more. Learning a new language can also break down barriers and increase social mobility for people. I learned talking to their CEO that there's actually 1 billion people globally who are learning English to be able to get a job and improve their life. So Duolingo is going to be able to help them get to that goal. And education, we've seen, is a lot better when we have students, teachers, and parents all connected and on the same page. And Remind has made a new app that's been able to connect 35% of all US K-12 teachers with their students and parents to have engaging conversations. RunKeeper and Lose It have used new Google Fit technology to create a personalized workout. They can measure which donut you ate and then tell you exactly how far you have to run to burn it back off. And GoCheck in Indonesia has made a surface that's now the fastest way around to get around Jakarta or other Indonesian service cities. They have over 3,000 registered drivers today. We also have Mango Health. We have Jamia. We have Best Fiends raising money for malaria. We have Weve Video. And I could go on for basically the rest of the day talking about all the different developers that we have here who are trying to have a positive impact on the world. So today's 13-year-olds don't have a Spark station, right? They have this. They have access to this thing. And they grew up thinking it's normal to have an app like Mango Health that reminds you to take a critical medication, or an app like GoCheck that means that when you go to Indonesia, you can summon a motorcycle taxi like that. And, you know, they're starting to do some pretty cool stuff with that. I think back to my 13-year-old self, my Spark station, my Blue Links, and I wrote a paper. But these kids are doing so much more than that. Here are 3 teenage siblings in Georgia. So their parents worked in corporate America and managed software developers. They saw all the benefits that these software developers were getting by having those skills and always encouraged their kids to study computer science, even from an early age. And as many of you know, the world where we live, it's not perfect. And recently in the US, we've had a lot of concerns around law enforcement and civil rights. So these teenagers, in response, decided to build an app, because that's what we do today. And they're enabling people to understand what their rights are. And they're also able to share their experiences with law enforcement, both positive and negative. The experience here is to improve transparency in the whole process and to give a voice to people who didn't have one before. So in case you're wondering, this app now has an average rating of 4.5 stars and tens of thousands of installs. These young developers have shed light on an important issue, and it's really powerful. So when I was 13, I wanted more people to have access to information so that they could empower themselves and their communities. And I can't wait to see what the world looks like when these teenagers here are up on this stage telling their story. Thank you.